He is still throwing more and more lives of Russian soldiers into this meat grinder. And we are fighting with them. Thousands of people will die until the moment somebody will resolve it, whether within the Russian ranks, somebody will decide that enough, something will happen to Putin, or maybe he will come to senses.
Russian forces are now in full control of Mariupol after the last defenders of the Azovstal steelworks surrendered. There are reports of a renewed Russian attacks across the east of the country and further warnings that millions of tons of food supplies are blockaded in the southern ports. Well, we can talk now to Ukraine's ambassador to the UK, Vadym Prystaiko. Good morning to you, Ambassador.
Good morning.
Really good to have you with us this morning. First of all, just tell us about the latest on the conflict. It does appear that there is quite a concerted new offensive across the east of the country.
You're right, the Russians are trying to regain the control of the eastern parts and the south after they've been kicked out of the northern parts, where the Kiev capital and the second biggest city, Kharkiv, are. Actually, it was much closer to Russian territory, so they could support and supply their troops. But the resistance of the Ukrainian forces were too high for them to bear. So now, when they are freed of this 2 months at least of this war in Mariupol, where small Ukrainian forces managed to hold down so many of them, now they freed these forces and they're moving up to the battle.
And the decision clearly was taken eventually that those fighters simply couldn't hold out in those Azovstal steelworks anymore. And of course, we look at the scale of the destruction in Mariupol. But that was a strategic loss for Ukraine, wasn't it? Because it now helps Russia with that goal of linking up the territory that it holds in the east of the country with those southern ports.
Frankly speaking, from the military point of view, it was rather issue which can be taken care much earlier. First of all, because the Mariupol is within the Russian occupied territory. It's a back in the area guard. So it's not actually it was making so much of the military point, but the political point was very important. That these people, couple of thousands, they can hold so much of Russians, and they cannot move further. So they went over, and when they managed to get into Mariupol itself, the small town, they were holding one particular factory. This was a huge blow to the policies and the bombastic advertisements of their great powers and their soldiers. So from political point of view, it was important. Militarily, not that much. That's why we are so happy at the end of this that lives are spared of our soldiers. Yes, it is drama for many Ukrainians. Yes, they're in captivity now, but at least they're alive.
We've had President Zelensky describing the situation in the east as extremely difficult. Do you think ultimately Ukraine is going to have to accept some loss of territory along the east of the country if it's ever going to try and reach some kind of accommodation with Russia?
You're right. All the words at the end of the day, they will end up at the table of negotiations. The question is, what would be the conditions of this conversation, of these diplomatic talks? With each and every day, Ukraine is fighting and resisting. The better our chances are, to actually finally free our lands from Russia's presence. Whether it will come to this and when it will come to this will depend on two major factors: how Ukrainians are strong enough to do what they wanted to do, to have their country united and strong, and still being able to go the way of development as we wanted to go, sort of west, and without democratic and free market development. Second one is how we are supported in our struggle, how much we received help, political help, financial help, military help.
But we're also hearing that while you and President Zelensky have both accepted that ultimately the conflict will have to be resolved through negotiation, I mean, there's at the moment the Ukrainian government is saying that they won't even agree a ceasefire, with Moscow still continuing to hold territory across various parts of Ukraine.
Many people believe that Russians already lost. They offered the idea to their own people for 3 days invasion. They believe they can do it, and now it's what 86th day of 3 days invasion. So this is the politically is already lost. But Putin, many people believe, cannot just admit the idea that he have to rethink. He's still throwing more and more lives of Russian soldiers into this meat grinder, and we are fighting with them. Thousands of people will die until the moment somebody will resolve it, whether within the Russian ranks somebody will decide that enough, something will happen to Putin, or maybe he will come to senses and understand that he's not gaining anything. He is just throwing his own nation back. He's going down and bringing all of them with them. That's where we believe there will be the line where this compromise is possible.
So when you hear that, the terrible loss of life on the Russian side as well as on Ukraine and the suffering there, how do you get from that stage to a situation where you can have a proper negotiation?
We had the proper negotiation. They just stalled because Russians understood that we are not going along the pre-written lines. They wanted unjustified so much of us. It's not about NATO expansion, because what he achieved, NATO actually expanded. There are another 1,000 kilometers of the border between NATO and Russia appeared. So that's what he will have to explain to his own people. But there are other things which will not allow us to move along this. He has to come to senses, and we're helping with each and every tank blown, with each and every soldier killed. That we are getting into the moment when he will understand that no, there is not a way. He can't break the resistance and will of Ukrainians, and he will have to count with that, and he will have to rethink his strategy. I understand that the situation, the sanctions, the Russians now understand how deeply in trouble they are, and they don't want to go this way. Unfortunately, there is not much on the streets. We can see demonstrations against this war, and still so many people are supporting through this, the support of the televised sort of addresses and all of this craziness they have now. But it will subdue. We will come to the point when Russians will understand that it's not, they can't win militarily the war with Ukraine. And finally, they found the opponent very worthy of them.
What about the situation with the ports in Ukraine? We're hearing that millions of tons of food and other supplies are blockaded there. That clearly is adding to the global shortages which everyone is facing. How difficult is that situation?
Ukraine has geographically access to two seas. One is Sea of Azov, very shallow and warm, nice for the kids' resorts. And it's not much commercial activity you can imagine there because Russians totally took over the shorelines. And Mariupol was one of the major ports there, mostly metallurgical. So that's where we had the chance to, export and earn our living. But most important now is the ports in the Black Sea, where Odessa and all the ports around Odessa. We are responsible in the nation as agricultural powerhouse of at least 400 million people around the globe. We are feeding that many people in the globe. And these people will suffer because of this blockade. We cannot provide this grain, and we're responsible for 10% global production, 15% of corn. All of this wealth is now locked in Ukraine and in our silos. And we don't have a place to put our new harvest, 2022, which we will soon have in a couple of months. We will have to put it somewhere. So the idea is how to we unblock these seas, whether we do it ourselves, militarily, or with the pressure from the rest of the world. It's not just the West. West is safe, but the problem is in Africa. Problem will be in Latin America, in Asia, where the most of our exporters. And it's not just Ukrainian ships. More than 70 ships under different flags are now blockaded with their crews, with their merchandise on board in our seas, and they are not allowed to get out.
Let me bring in my co-host this morning, Kate McCann.
Good morning, Ambassador. You mentioned something there about the prospect of the support for the war in Ukraine and how that might affect the outcome. Are you worried that with the international community facing an energy crisis, facing potentially, as you just said there, food shortages now, that the support might start to wane and that could have an impact?
There could be two ways of resolving this. Either we are scared by what he is trying to do, and with the blockade of the food and the energy prices, and just the whole economic situation around the globe, the uncertainty which is growing among the investors, the situation on different merchandise markets which are not immediately connected to energy or the grains, but they will be affected. So there are two ways. Either the world community will be scared to death and will try to find some sort of cut a deal with Russians and pressure Ukraine, which I don't believe is much more possible in my way, that international community still understands and still come to help Ukraine in this war, not just because of the how fair is that to support us, no, but they have to teach the aggressors the lesson and all the future aggressors that we are so interconnected nowadays. We can't even think of fighting each other because this the planet is not big enough for us to fight and kill people and actually bring in everybody else in recession.
Vadym Prystaiko, Ukraine's ambassador to the UK. Great to speak to you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you very much.